Ready? Next slide. Okay, our second speaker of the day is Vera, Wild Ocean Pearls. She's joining us from Nova Scotia. She is amazing. Thank you for traveling. Thank you for traveling. Thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to hear your presentation. Get some tissues, ladies. Get some tissues.
Hey, pearly people, fellow pearly people. My name's Vera. As Sarah already told you all. I'm from Wild Ocean Pearls, and I fish blue mussel pearls from the Northern Atlantic by hand. And I buy deep sea scallop pearls from fishermen in my community, and those are a byproduct of the scallop food fisheries. And I'm a little bit nervous today, so I'm going to my cards. So I just want to tell you today about my life and how I became a pearly person, and the lives of the people who fish wild ocean pearls. So, thank you. Basically, rowing out into the bays of the Northern Atlantic, when I'm looking for blue mussel pearls, what I'm doing is passing over in my little rowboat. I'm passing over hundreds and sometimes even thousands of pearls, of mussels, because I'm in search of the type of mussel that might contain a pearl. And that is the recurring theme of wild ocean pearls, is the incomparable struggle, the incomparable beauty rather in struggle. So I'm looking for a blue mussel that's struggling. But let's start with the jewelry.
Can you speak louder?
Yeah?
Can you speak
Okay.
to the microphone, please?
Oh, is it on?
I'm not sure.
Testing. I have a pretty loud voice, so I can kind of, hello? Hello? I can just try to speak loud. How about that?
Yeah.
Does that feel good? Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me get a little hydration. Thanks, guys. So in 2001, I met commercial fisherman Matthew in a cafe near my home that sells the best croissants. And Matthew had just come from offshore, and he had a terrible week fishing. So despite working 98 hours of his week offshore shucking scallops, he'd only made $80. Yeah, and so that's because fishermen like Matthew are usually paid based on how many pounds of scallop meat they bring to harvest. But the silver lining was that Matthew shucked a once-in-a-lifetime pearl weighing over 12 carats. And so he rushed from the boat straight to me. And I had that pearl for less than 12 hours before it moved to Switzerland. So I could pick a scallop fisherman like Matthew in the lineup as long as I saw their hands, because they have swollen knuckles like me, from which spell out the hard work that they have in their lives. And most of them have, especially one hand, because of the latex gloves they wear, that's just so beat up. And they all have scars right here from where their rubber gloves end, because they have this repeated motion of like, they cut the abductor open, slip, slop, flop. And when they do that, their rubber glove just flip-flops on their hands. So what they do is they cut cotton socks to leave bands of cotton socks on their forearms to avoid that scarring. But you could pick them out of a lineup. So the reason fishermen in my community, like Matthew, sell their wild pearls to me is because I always tell them the sale value of their pearl before making them an offer on it. So in the case of Matthew's once-in-a-lifetime button, I offered him 70% of the sale value of the pearl. And this is the success. I attribute my success to these ethics, because I don't have to advertise. Fishermen just keep coming to me. And I feel like this equality is palpable in all of the pearls that I sell. So they come with free good vibes. So something else, if you're like me and you like scouring the internet for precious metals, artfully clutching gems like pearls, then you've probably seen the pearl that Matthew fished. and sold to me. And I'll show it to you here.
Wow.
So that was fished by Matthew. And it's actually back in our continent now in a private collection. This is another scallop pearl. So deep sea scallop pearls like Matthew's, and the one that you see now, which was actually fished by Clayton, are non-nacreous pearls.
Are what?
Non-nacreous? Yeah. Is my voice getting louder? Bring it up? Okay. And you can identify them because of this distinct flame pattern. So with my clients who are considering natural pearls as an investment, I tend to steer them towards a pearl like this. Because now you've seen deep sea scallop pearls, all of you know what deep sea scallop pearls look like. You can pick them out of the lineup. And except for early studies in laboratories, non-nacreous pearls are not cultured. So if you are buying a natural deep sea scallop pearl, you know it's not a cultured deep sea scallop pearl. So this, as well as knowing the name, knowing personally each of the people who fish the scallop pearls that I buy, is how I can confidently offer a money-back guarantee of authenticity. So I am pretty terrified of accidentally selling somebody a cultured pearl and saying it's natural. So you know the sweet meat that we all enjoy from scallops. It's actually not the entire fish, it's just the abductor muscle. So all other bivalves also have abductor muscles, but funnily enough, like mussels, probably most of us have eaten mussels, often the abductor muscle remains on the shell when you eat it. So that's the piece that kind of stays glued into the shell. And I recommend popping it off because I think it's the best part of it. But odd that in some bivalves we are excluding the abductor, whereas in scallops it's just the abductor that we eat. But all of the meat of the scallop is edible. Okay, all of the meat is edible, but it's just that how fantastic and how large it is that's dictated the way that it's fished. So the reason that the abductor is so bulky in this species is that scallop is the only species that can open and close its shell to propel itself quickly along the seafloor. So mussels, they can use their little hairy legs to kind of like slowly grab like this, and they can move. But a scallop, I've seen it before diving for bay scallops in my area. I swam down about 8 or 10 feet to grab, there was like a little cluster of 4 bay scallops. And as I got closer, they all started jumping away from me like little underwater bunny rabbits. And I think I got 3. It was hardly enough for lunch. But. The same day that Matthew entrusted his pearl to me that I showed you in the ring by Andrea Capello, I got this pearl. Let's see if I can find it. And I believe there's a picture here. These are shucking scallops. You can see the socks on the forearms. And I'll tell you more about that fisherman later. Excuse me. But I want to tell you a bit about this scallop pearl and this jewelry. So this pearl is also fished by Matthew, the same one who fished that large pearl that you saw. And I had it set in gold by Sam Werman. I don't know if any of you know this jeweler. He's fantastic. The face of the pearl is gorgeous. It's a perfect pearl dealer's pearl because the back and sides of it were hideous. So we tend to hold on to those ones and cover them in gold. It was the first piece of fine jewelry that I bought for myself. Before that, I waited in vain for other people to buy me jewelry that I liked. My unsolicited advice is buy yourself the jewelry that you like. I've been wearing this pendant by Sam Werman for over 3 years, and I used to wear it on silver, and now I wear it on gold on a chain I got from someone here. And I just think of it as a daily reminder of my innate worth and how I can get what I want. So, but not to be distracted by beautiful bezels. the first pearls that I fished and that I sold were not deep sea scallop pearls, they were blue mussel pearls, Mytilus etilis. And the blue mussel pearl strand that I'm wearing today, let's see if we have a picture of it there, has its own story. I think the best way for me to start telling you that story is to tell you about the person who knotted it for me. It's Emily of Locust Art Jewelry in Canada, in Nova Scotia, where I live. And when we met about our first project, a different project, she told me, I didn't choose pearls. Pearls chose me. And I don't know if that resonates with some of you. And pearls chose me, for sure. They chose me when I was casting the dock lines off of a little sailboat in my mid-20s. I sailed from Canada to the Bahamas and back, and my budget was so low that I could choose to either buy boat parts or food. So I learned to fish and forage. And that way I fished all over, mostly the United States, but also into the Caribbean and Canada. And I would say collectively, this group probably owns a pearl of each species that I fished. But along those trips, I never found pearls. Instead, I found the father of my children. And we found that we both wanted to sail full-time with kids. So we sailed back to Canada, eating seafood all the way. And we sold our 2 little boats, and we bought a big boat. And we made some kids, and then 2 years later, we cast the dock lines off of our big boat and set off in search of warm winters, I guess, to escape the Canadian winters, and adventure, and lots and lots of seafood. See, I think I have a picture of that for you. There we go. My son was just 19, or my daughter was 19 months old when we left Canada, and my son was 2 weeks old. We got a little bit pinched. They're sailing babies. We were a little pinched by the closing of the canal time, so as soon as my midwives gave me the thumbs up, we just passed by the line. And so, my son, so in the first year of his life, I think this photograph down here was taken in just south of New York City. So they had just done their first long offshore passage, which wasn't very great. And he ended up living in 10 countries in the first year of his life. So they started speaking Spanish when we were living in Guatemala, and it was as romantic as you can imagine, but parts of it were not good. Parts of it were really bad. And so about 2 years, a little over 2 years into that trip, we sailed back to Canada. And that's when a bucket of blue mussels changed the trajectory of my life. And I'm really, really grateful for it. So this is my home. This is near my home. This is where I fish, places around here. So it was the change happened on a foggy morning in Nova Scotia, which is another reoccurring theme, fog, I would say. I clipped my kids into life jackets. They would have been probably around 2 and 3, I guess 2 and 3 at the time. And I passed them down into an 8-foot dinghy, quite similar to this one, to their father. And we just went out to explore. And that, of course, is my favorite part of cruising, is exploring the coastline. And my kids and I could sit in that little dinghy and just watch seabirds and look for little shoreline creatures from sunrise until sunset, as long as we had snacks. So it was just a normal day like that. And we headed out into this gorgeous bay that it wasn't right here, but it's not far from here. And you can see this is eelgrass around my dinghy, and mussels love being in and around the eelgrass. So I noticed from the dinghy there were loads of big fat mussels, and I started to feel that lunch was coming soon. So at that time, just weeks before, we'd been living in the Caribbean, and I hadn't acclimatized to the northern climate. So I jumped over the side of the dinghy and started hyperventilating. And I couldn't breathe, I was shaking, and the water here is always cold. It's usually around 10 degrees Celsius. I don't know how to put that into Fahrenheit. Chilly Billy. And I almost got out of the water, actually, but luckily I didn't, and I gathered a small bucket of mussels, maybe 2 dozen mussels, and I threw them into the dinghy to the delighted squeals of my children. They wanted me to grab a crab that was scurrying along the seafloor, which I did not. And I jumped back into the dinghy and shivered back to the boat. And I think, let me see what I want to tell you a little bit about how mussels form. I think this is pretty cool. So this is what we have to thank for blue mussel pearls. So blue mussel pearls, as with other pearls, are a product of parasites, typically. And it was really interested by this study specifically, which cited over 200 years of studies into Mytilus edilis, based on meat culturing predominantly. And what they found, as they were trying to grow mussel meat, is that in a certain area in the Walney Channel in England, that the mussels started to get gritty, started to grow pearls into them. So they researched and they found that a trematode, a parasite, was responsible for it, which grew to an adult stage inside of a number of species of sea duck. And it would lay eggs inside the intestines of the sea duck, which the eggs would then be defecated into the water. The eggs would embryonate in the water and then become free-swimming parasites. They would swim into the first intermediate host, develop as the slide shows you. They would exit, which they didn't really clarify how they exited, which is something I'm really curious about. Maybe Douglas can find out for us. And then they would latch onto the mantle of the second intermediate host. The studies theorized that there could be more than one second intermediate host, but in this case, they say in mussel. And when the parasite starts to create sort of a marine cocoon of sorts to be able to develop into its adult stage, I guess that is kind of it changes from a soft thing into a hard thing. And at that point, the blue mussels coat the intruder in nacre at about the same rate that they grow their own shell. So I think that's pretty cool. Something that I felt kind of like, yeah, blue mussels, because when the parasite is coated and turned into a pearl, it cannot develop into an adult. If it wasn't to be coated in a pearl, it would be, hopefully, for the parasite, ingested by a seabird, and then it would grow into adulthood, lay eggs, and then it would just keep going. So the study, they were theorizing in the study that there would be second intermediate hosts because blue mussel was so good at encapsulating this particular parasite. So now you know what happened to my lunch, I guess, which is that it got home to the boat and it was completely inedible. So I shut them open. I was so excited. We boiled them up first. So I guess those were heat treated pearls. And it was just like there was big sand in every bite. And I was so disappointed. I felt like I had senselessly killed 24 like important creatures. So I started feeding them to my dog, Vera, who was like really, really excited about that. She didn't have any teeth, so it didn't like grit on her. But I think probably around the time that my dog had ingested about $200 worth of pearls, I realized that they were pearls and not sand. Yeah, so yeah, I remember it vividly. Actually, it was really it was a changing moment in my life. Let's see what picture we have here. Oh yeah, there. That's what I saw.
Wow.
So you can see just beautiful whites, creamy colors, super lustrous, purples, blues, pinks, browns, sometimes golden hues. And these can be found within the same mussel sometimes. They're not all making the same color. Sometimes there's no rhyme or reason to it. I can't explain it. Again, maybe Douglas can explain for us. But it changed my life. I realized that they were beautiful, they were captivating, but also they were really valuable. So shortly after, I reached out to an international dealer, and she bought all of the pearls I found, sight unseen. And I was thinking, this is really, really good. More sailing chips, as they call them. And so I started to kind of look for what kind of mussels might contain pearls. And about maybe 2 weeks after my first pearly lunch, I gathered a few more pearls. And actually, some of the pearls that I gathered 2 weeks after that first pearly lunch are in this strand, which I showed you before. So at that time, I would say about a few months anyway, after my first pearly lunch, I brought those pearls, which are in this necklace, with me when I left my boat home with my kids and we moved into a women's shelter. And so that was a really hard part of our life. And it was out of that women's shelter that I started Wild Ocean Pearls. So I started dealing pearls. I opened a little Instagram page, and a few days in, I think it was maybe 3 days in, somewhere abouts, someone bought pearls from me. And I was shocked and excited, and I put the kids to bed, and in the room that we shared in this women's shelter for women and children leaving domestic abuse. And I put the kids to bed, I made the sale, I put them to bed, and ran downstairs to the room where the shelter workers were, and asked them to share in my celebration. We had high fives all around, really exciting. So women celebrating women has been a part of Wild Ocean Pearls from the beginning. Feels like a cheer too. So some of these pearls were there for that. It feels nice to remember those. And I can show you a picture actually. So this was the kids and I'm trying not to show the room, but that is one of our first posts on our Instagram. And that's the kids and I in the room that we shared in Harbor House. Stay there for a second. So not long after that, I found a gorgeous oceanfront cottage that was for rent for the off season. And it was right on our ocean home. So the kids and I moved in there, and I started building a full-size school bus into a house for us. I was able to rent the cottage just for the off season. And around that time, I would live shuck blue mussel pearls on Instagram for anyone who would watch, and I would give free pearls. I was just please buy pearls from me. I need building materials. And it was around that time that I met Andrea. Thank you for supporting me from the beginning. I appreciate you. I owe a lot to those people like Andrea who were there from the very beginning. I have so much gratitude for how they and Pearls have changed my life. It's been really awesome. So, and around that time too, I met Franny and Joe from Franny E-Jewelry. And that was during one of those live shucking. It was probably really bad marketing. A lot of the people who would get pearls would just be cool, pearls, didn't know anything about it, but it was a lot of fun. And I met Franny E-Jewelry, and because they won some of my pearls, and they started setting them in rings like this, just tiny little seed blue mussel pearls. So I actually commissioned this ring for myself from them. And I had it set with 3 pearls, which I fished, which represent my 3 sisters, who are my cheerleaders, more women supporting this woman, as well as my son, Hans, my daughter, Cora, and myself. Just feel like those dream teams of 3. And when it came time to pay for the ring, Joe and Franny of Franny E-Jewelry wouldn't take my money. So this is commemorative because it is the first pearl gift, one of the first pearl gifts that I had as a result of Wild Ocean Pearls. And there have been lots since then, which is one of the best parts of my job. So at the time I mentioned that I was building the school bus. That's us, that's where we are now. And Franny, actually it was Joe and Franny E-Jewelry, she made me promise that I would never wear the seed pearl ring that she made for me while I was building my school bus or diving for blue mussel pearls. I've mostly kept my promise to her so far, don't tell her. It was around this time, that time of my life, that I started to really notice the external characteristics that wouldn't guarantee, but that would definitely point to pearls being inside of the mussels. So one that I want to mention is also mentioned in some way in the study that I had spoken about before, and that is damage of the mantle. So the outer part of the shell, when I am going in my rowboat looking for what mussels might come home with me, it's not about size. I'm not necessarily looking for a really big mussel. What I want to see is a mussel that's struggling. And one thing that suggests pearls and that suggests struggles is for that outer part of the shell to be damaged. And I say shoulders. Whenever I bring people out with me, I would say, look for the shoulders. So rather than the mussel coming together like this, it would almost come together like this. And sometimes you can even see, this has a bit of an example on the right side, you see it better, there's an indentation. This isn't a great example of it, but the gnarlier the mantle, the better for me. And actually, something I should probably mention to the people who produced that study about the Walney Channel, they had suggested that moving the mussels for meat aquaculturing at 18 months of age was something that they'd like to do to prevent pearling inside of the mussels. But I'm imagining if you're transporting 18-month-old mussels, that they're probably going to damage the mantles. So they were hoping to move it to areas where there weren't the sea ducks that host the parasite. But I think I think they should go back to the drawing board. Another characteristic that doesn't guarantee but certainly suggests pearls is pollution. So in a lot of my favorite bays where I found the best pearls, like just mussels with tons of pearls and all, every mussel that I find will have pearls sometimes, of the older ones, there's often copper pipes and like old busted up steel boats and even submerged lead acid batteries. So I think that this pollution is making it, whatever it is doing, whether it's making it harder for the mussel to be healthy or whether it's making it easier for the parasite to be strong or to enter into it, So part of my commitment to leaving the world better than I found it is that I take that stuff out of the water when I take out the mussels. So happy oceans, happy people. So simultaneously around this time, the kids and I moved into our solar-powered school bus, which you saw before in the winter. It's fed by rainwater and nestled into the forest. It was around this time that a chance meeting found the wife of a deep-sea scallop fisherman at my home. Jen was her name. And so I wanted to know if her husband had ever found scallops, and scallop pearls rather, and he had. So he ended up being the second fisherman with wild ocean pearls. Then I met Richard, who was a neighbor. He lives just down the road from me, and he'd been fishing deep sea scallops for 10 years. So he invited me to his home, where I got to go over his 10-year collection. So Richard fishes off of a bigger boat, and they would go offshore for 3 weeks at a time. So in this long time away from his young family, he would save all of the pearls and bring them home to his daughter. But as a teen, she wasn't interested anymore in pearls, so they decided to sell the collection to me. And I actually found, I think it was 2 of the pearls of this scallop pearl graduated choker on that visit with Richard. So he sold me every pearl that he'd ever fished apart from one, which he kept to make a pendant for his daughter, which was pretty sweet. And so I told you that I left Richard's house with, I think, 2 or 3 of the pearls off of this necklace, but also with venison from his freezer, and what else? Scallops, cod cheeks. Have you guys ever had cod cheeks before? And home-raised pork that he'd raised himself, as well as a new friend, for sure. And I guess a year later, Richard stopped scalloping. He didn't want to be away from his family for so long, and he probably built up a good enough callus on his forearms. So he started fishing seaweed, and we had been, speaking about something, and he told me that jeweler who had taken his daughter's last pearl stopped returning his calls. So I conspired with one of my clients, Justine, a goldsmith close to me, and in exchange for a different one of Richard's pearls, she made one of his pearls that I had into a pendant for his daughter. And so I had prospered and so much from my business relationship with Richard that it was really nice for me to be able to express that to his family. And so that's the vibe. That's the Wild Ocean Pearl vibe for sure. And it wasn't, I don't know, a year later after that or so, my parents came to visit, and Richard came over and brought us a few more pounds of scallop meat. So, yeah. And this is the strand that I'm wearing that has a few pearls from Richard. But it took more than one fisherman to make this necklace for sure. The probability of finding a gem quality scallop pearl is about 1 in 50,000. So gives you an idea of how many scallops they had to open. For 4 years, my children and I met with local deep sea scallop fishermen, buying over 100 years of accumulative deep sea scallop pearl collections. Dave and Forrester met me at a local mall, and my daughter Cora, who was about 5 at the time, sat on my lap, and together we sorted through the largest deep sea scallop pearl collection that I've ever seen. It was the collection of Forrester. So Cora, my daughter, she was helping to sort all of the round pearls, all of the gem quality pearls from the Baroque, irregular, rough pearls, because really the vast majority of the pearls look more like sugar that's gotten wet or something, little lumps of something you probably wouldn't want to wear on your neck. And it was during that time that my daughter decided that she too was a pearl dealer. And she also decided that a number of the nicest pearls would be for her collection. We're still negotiating that. Usually she gets what she wants. It was around that time that the kids and I started to draft a list of what we wanted in our forever home. It was something like a field, mature trees, a bathtub, within walking distance to a swimming hole, great neighbors, and a field. I don't know if I mentioned that. And of course, yeah, within biking distance to the ocean. That was an important one. I am a firm believer that getting what you want begins with first knowing what you want. So we had the first step all the way down. It was around that time that a fisherman, Jacob, reached out to me, and I bought one more pearl for this strand. He introduced me to his uncle. What was his uncle's name? I had it written down. It was James, and James had found the largest deep sea scallop shell burr that I'd ever seen. It was over 55 carats, so pretty impressive. He had knocked it off the shell. Can we let out a collective like, oh, but still fascinating. And they introduced me to their captain, Craig, who found one more pearl from this collection. It was around that time that the kids and I found a place to rent that checked almost all the boxes on our wish list. So I drove our school bus, the magic school bus as we call it, 6 kilometers down the road to the place where it is now, nestled in the big trees on the side of a field, surrounded by great neighbors, and just a bike to the ocean. And it was really close to that time that I had met Craig, the captain of James and Jacob's boat. He invited me to his house to see swordfish blades. Have you guys ever seen those? So you know what a swordfish is. Well, when they fish them, they keep the blade in it. It does look a lot like a sword. And what he'd done is like hammered pearls into them, which attests to like how incredibly strong natural pearls are. He just like smashed them in. So it was all embellished with scallop pearls. And I didn't leave with a sword, but I did with one more pearl from this strand, as well as a fresh lobster. We do eat a lot of seafood. And I remember, Craig's grandbaby was visiting when I was there. It really gives a feel of a humanizing nature to the industry. And you can't help but have admiration for the people that I meet who I buy pearls from, because they're really tough. They're really, really tough people. The type of work that they do is incredibly dangerous, and it's really challenging. And I really have a lot of admiration and gratitude to them. I'm also grateful that I can affect the natural pearl trade in a compassionate way and try and share a little bit more about the people behind the pearls, but also to have them benefit from their work, that they make the most money from the pearls that they fish. I think that's cool. So this was Forrester, who I told you about, who had the largest pearl collection, and 3 of his pearls made it into my necklace. And here he is holding some of the nicer ones, but it was a really big collection. And the beautiful struggle continued as I met with Forrester, Jeff, Rod, hopefully I'll get their names right, Tyler, Devin, Ryan, Dave, Brad, Joshua, that's not Skylar, but I have Skylar written down here, Brandon, Joe, and as easy as that, 1 necklace was finished. These are the people of Wild Ocean Pearls.
Wow.
So 5 years later, now in contract to buy the dream land that the kids and I manifested, and starting to cry for the 3rd time. And it's with a trampoline. I'll have you know, I don't know if I mentioned that was on the list. I still shiver to get into the Northern Atlantic every time. And I still know who fished every pearl that I sell, and so do my clients who buy them. I still give high fives with every single sale that I make. So if you're lucky enough to be around, get ready. And I still gasp with each natural pearl that I find. It's just story. It's been really great. These are happy tears. I'm still committed to paying the most for natural pearls to the people who fish them. And I'm still finding beauty in the struggle while being still choosing myself while being chosen by pearls. So here, treasured audience, is my parting gift. And that's if you should find yourself struggling like my treasured blue mussels, then make a pearl.